My name is Gitahi, as you've told. I was, not until very recently, the CEO of Nation Media Group. Nation Media Group is probably the biggest media house in East and Central Africa. Probably I would throw in West Africa as well. And now I am running a company called Tropical Brand. So I came from FMCG to FMCG. I have returned. We're talking about East Africa, and I kind of just want to continue from where the gentleman from PwC left and maybe look at some of the practical things on the ground. By East Africa, we're looking at Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. And together, this is a region of 150 million people. And brought together by East African community, a community fashioned along the same lines as the EU. Greater East Africa, however, if you're looking to being an investor in that part of the world, would include Ethiopia, which is 80 million people, and then Democratic Republic of Congo and Southern Sudan. Those are countries that have, one way or the other, got something to do with each other. For instance, Ethiopia aspires to use the port of Mombasa because it's landlocked, so does Southern Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo. So English is the official language, although the most widely spoken language is Kiswahili, and largely understood by most people in the region, including in DRC. And literacy levels is something that has been improving greatly, and now would, I think, on the whole, be over 60%. Now, only 20 years ago, when I was, I think, a young brand manager, the dominant media in each of the East African countries was the state broadcaster. The state radio was had the biggest market share and the biggest television. And other than BBC radio and in some cases German and USA public radios, there was virtually nothing else. 20 years later, the state broadcaster isn't in the top 5 in any of those countries for TV, radio, or print. More importantly, in each category, there are dozens of players with, for instance, whether you're talking about Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, you've actually got over 100 radio stations in each of those countries. The media with the highest reach remains radio, but television is probably, I would say, the fastest growing. And here are some of the statistics that are borrowed from Ipsos study that happens every day, actually, these days. Radio, yesterday, 61%, television, 17%. The important one there is probably the internet at 10%, which has been growing phenomenally. And just to reiterate what has been said before, this is the media to watch in East Africa. And I think East Africa is not going to go along the same sort of curve that maybe has happened in Europe. I think they are going to leapfrog because the people, the new consumers, the young consumers, the youthful consumers are actually already on those gadgets, as I'm going to demonstrate shortly. This is media data share, and you can see from that, radio is still the dominant media, almost the only media from that point of view. TV and internet coming up, but that is just looked at it from that prism of a typical day and includes everybody. Oops. Yeah, and preferred source of news, because news on its own is usually one of the top things that people are looking for from media. Source of news, as you can see, is broadly radio followed by television, internet coming up, newspapers there, and social media and online papers is something that has not caught on, but is going to be happening rapidly in the coming years. What about activities on the internet? Use of social media is 72%. Looking for information, communication via email, etc. And I don't think that is very different from what happens in other markets. Watch television or videos online. So it's sort of backing the trend that happens elsewhere in the world. What about magazines? The preferred content in magazines is, surprise, surprise, the biggest is relationship. I don't know how that would compare with other markets. Personal inspiration, fashion, beauty, business, all come right behind that in that order. Now, this is an important slide for people interested in the evolution of media and probably starting to point to what is going to happen in the coming years. You can see in 2007 where the various media platforms were and where they are in 2015. You can see that print, for instance, has had a massive drop of 58%, 2007 to 2015. Television has had a slight drop. Radio has had some drop as well. But mobile has seen the biggest gain, as you can see, of over 91%. What this chart is telling you is that East Africa is not going to be any different. That from an investment point of view, this is a time to invest. And I think we have the opportunity, as an investor, we have the opportunity or the luxury of learning what has happened elsewhere, like the speaker was saying in the morning, and maybe you go 2, 3, 4 years to ensure that we do it right in East Africa, because it's just beginning to happen. Moving on, this is a slide we probably have seen in many other presentations that I borrowed from my friend Sani Bidra. It took the airplane 68 years to get to 50 million users, TV 22 years, PC 14, iPod 4, Twitter 2, and basically saying that when you look even at East Africa, the pickup of new media, whether it is Facebook and all the others, is going to take significantly less time. So we are not talking about investing for decades. We are actually talking about investing something that is going to pick up very fast, because it's no longer them old days when airplanes were taking 68 years to get 50 million users. And another telling slide is this one in terms of where would I be investing. The median age for Europe is about 41. The median age in the US, 37, China, 24, India, 25, Sub-Saharan Africa is 18. So you're talking about a median age that is low. You're talking about a median age that is, of course, the younger people are much more educated, a very thriving and fast-growing middle class, and therefore, if I had a couple of dollars from this slide, I would begin to think about where to put it when it comes to new investments. And this is the other telling slide about the cell phone ownership. We all agree that the cell phone, the mobile phone, is going to be at the core of the evolution of internet and our ability to do business in that space, even as media practitioners. And you can see the penetration in terms of people who own cell phone: Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, South Africa, US, all right up there, meaning, and because of the unit price, and here we are actually talking about smartphones, because of the unit price, it's no longer that big television that used to cost many dollars. The affordability is way easier, and therefore it is not an issue in terms of mobile penetration. You can reach, in terms of proportion of population, you can reach as many as you can anywhere else in the world. In fact, Kenya has 35 million mobile subscribers. The leading telecommunications company in Kenya, Safaricom, famous for M-Pesa financial transactions, is probably 3 times bigger now than any other company in Nairobi Stock Exchange. The M-Pesa platform that people use to transact business, to send money, when I was sitting over there, I sent some money back home because I'm able to do that using M-Pesa. Is actually, if it was hived off to become a bank, it would actually be the second biggest bank in Kenya. That just shows you how much it has penetrated and how much the mobile phone has become important and even core to people's lives. To my mother, to my father, to the person in a deep rural part of Kenya, we are able to do business with M-Pesa, and I'm able to send money from wherever I am in the world. And look at Facebook and Twitter users. And this slide talks about Facebook, of course, being king and being probably one of the biggest social media sites, but Instagram also coming up significantly. Now, shifting gears a little to look at ease of doing business, because my presentation is kind of more looking at you as a possible investor in that part of the world. These statistics show largely a good improvement or some improvement in terms of World Bank Doing Business Index. Kenya has moved from 129 to 108. But I'll tell you what is most important about these slides, that statistic, is the fact that the presidents of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda actually have doing business as a core part of cabinet meetings every week. And I know that because we have a private sector forum that interfaces with the government every 6 months in almost all those countries. And we are able to ask, what are we doing about making it easier to do business? And the presidents, certainly in Kenya and Uganda, will go out, will tell a minister to start off and explain to the private sector what they are doing, what the obstacles are, and what we should expect 6 months later when we meet again. So this is beginning to yield results. You can see that movement. You can see movement in Uganda, probably not as much in Tanzania, but they've just been going through an election and have new leadership. Rwanda still remains a darling in terms of investment because Kagame started this quite a while back and is very, very clear about the role of private sector in the development of that part of the world. However, let's talk about some challenges and be honest about it, and even as we look at the opportunities. The first one identifies the radio challenge. Radio, as you have seen in some of my slides, is easily the media in Kenya when you're talking about reaching the population. The opportunities is the medium with the highest reach of over 90%, but the challenge is that first, it's local. Local in the sense from an advertiser point of view. Remember the 100 radio stations in probably 50 different dialects makes it, from a scale point of view, makes it a little bit of a challenge. But if one is able to run across those dialects, you will reach, depending on your product or service, many, many people in Kenya. The radio challenge also arises because when you have 100 radio stations, it means that almost everybody has been able to start a radio station. It also means that the quality of the journalist is oftentimes wanting. And I would say, of all the media, if I remove social media, I would say in the mainstream media, radio is probably the one that requires a little bit more in terms of training than the other media. The regulatory landscape, this has traditionally been a challenge, but I'm happy to say that, again, in almost all the countries, we are seeing great improvements. I know when I was running Nation Media Group last year, but we had our East African, there is only one paper weekly that actually runs across the 5 East African countries. And in Tanzania, in the run-up to the election, they had a reason to shut it down, and they only opened it up after the new president was sworn in. And the reason was that it did not have, we didn't have a license, although we had been operating for 20 years. And that really was never the rule because Time, Economist, all the other publications actually do operate without the license because they are not printed in the country. However, media that steers out of controversy, particularly on issues surrounding the heads of state, if you do everything else but you don't talk about President Museveni, oftentimes even Kagame, then you survive, you do well. But if you keep moving into that area, then you're likely to have a few problems. The next one is the new media, the print challenge. And I think the whole morning we've been talking about that. I quite liked the fact that one of the presenters, whose presentation I'll say is long live print. But the new media has been embraced by East Africans, as I've said. With new media, both information and entertainment are now quite freely available. Slowly and surely, the first casualties are going to be print. The government of Kenya, actually recently, because they are saying that the print is anti-government, decided that all the advertisements from government was going to be just one little paragraph saying, for these appointments or for this contract or for this tender, refer to, go straight to tenders.government. And that is where you're going to get whatever information that you require. So that is already a challenge. However, the traditional media has embraced this, and Nation, the company I was working for 10 years, has over 50 million hits on its portal. But how to make money And I guess that's part of the conversations that will be going on, or has been going on, like everywhere else in the world, remains a challenge. Although Nation Media Group is a pretty profitable company with a traditional media with a profit before tax of about $40 million. The other one is the challenge of fragmentation. In each of the 5 countries, I've talked about radio being fragmented, and even TV now with digital. Anybody is able to start your own station, and therefore, we have that challenge of fragmentation that is there. But I see that also as an opportunity for consolidation, which is exactly what I'm talking about in this slide. With all that fragmentation, I think the market is crying for opportunities or investor who is going to come and buy up a few of those and consolidate into a media house to compete with the others, the 2 or 3 others that are there that are big and strong. There is also opportunity to create a Pan-African media. In this part of the world, I think we have Al Jazeera, we have CNN. Where is the CNN of Africa? Do we have opportunity for CNN of Africa? My view is a big yes, because Africa increasingly is becoming an important player in the world, not just in business, but also in social and entertainment activities. So there is also opportunity for partnerships. And why I say this is because whenever companies in the Nairobi Stock Exchange or Dar es Salaam or Uganda Stock Exchange have gone for IPO, initial public offers, almost in all the cases, with pretty average companies, they have been heavily oversubscribed. So there's a lot of cash in the market looking for good homes. And I dare say lots of good people willing to partner with people out there. There is also the challenge of bandwidth, but this is changing because there are lots of companies that are now investing in the last mile. The cables, there are at least 4 companies that have invested in the main trunk bandwidth provision, but now there are many, many companies that are starting to provide that last mile to homes, and this is likely to bring the cost of internet access down. It is already significantly lower than South Africa, for instance, and it is set. And I would dare suggest even more reliable than most parts of Africa, and I think it's one of the reasons that's been driving the whole growth of the internet in that part of the world. So, last but one slide, some of the tips in terms of starting business. First of all, in most businesses, you can start with 100% ownership. Some of the fears of investors about going to a market, am I going to get the right partners, am I going to get the right people? In most East Africa, Kenya certainly, Rwanda, Tanzania, you can actually start 100%. And I think there are 1 or 2 people in this room who've been able to start business and own 100% without any issues. To register a company these days takes less than 48 hours in Kenya and Rwanda, a little longer in Tanzania, but that's part of the doing business index that's measured. It is coming down significantly because there is concern right up to cabinet level about just how well we are doing, because we realize competition is not about us and Tanzanians, but competition, or Ugandans, competition is actually us and the rest of the world in this brave new world. So you can be up and running with all the licenses, even in media, in less than a month. And labor in most, particularly in Kenya, in most areas is widely available and the price level not too high. I hope the presenter coming after me, who is a major investor in Kenya, will be able to ascertain that. So in conclusion, the challenge in East Africa, I think some of those challenges pale in comparison to the opportunity. I think in this brave new world of digital media, in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, is going to be significantly different. I'm also willing to put, to sign that this is going to be one of the hottest spots of growth in this, in East Africa. In 2050, for instance, the Eastern Africa bloc is going to be has the most population in Africa. So it is an area that one would do well to think about investing. I think it's the next frontier also on account of the young population, because the population is young, getting more educated, the middle class also growing very fast, and also increasingly is also becoming a very stable environment politically. In fact, I think the only problem we have which is my fourth bullet there, is Somalia. And of course, we do get, people talk about insecurity, but the insecurity is not really Kenya or Uganda or Tanzania. The insecurity is brought about by Somalia. You know all the story there, Al-Shabaab. But I want to say which region is safe. I used to think it's just because of Al-Shabaab, and then you hear it has happened in Kenya, it's happened in France, it's happened in other parts of the world. So these are global problems that we must all confront. But I want to say East Africa is relatively safe for that problems. And of course, we've got governments that are keen on improving that index. So that is it. Thank you very much. And I think I've saved 6 minutes. Thank you.